The Story of John, the Delivery Driver, Chapter 1. The delivery driver known as John seemed like any ordinary man, but behind his friendly smile and courteous demeanor was a monster. He was a serial killer who had been on the loose for years, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. The residents of the small town of Pandora were used to seeing John deliver packages to their doors, but no one suspected a thing. That is, until one day when a local woman disappeared without a trace. The police investigation led them straight to John, and they finally put an end to his killing spree. However, the twist in this story is that John didn't die in police custody as was reported. He had faked his own death and gone into hiding. Now, years later, he has resurfaced and has resumed his killing spree. The residents of Pandora are once again living in fear, but this time they are more vigilant and determined to catch the killer. One day, a young woman named Wendy received a package from John. She thought nothing of it and was about to open it when she noticed something strange. The package felt heavy, and when she shook it, she heard a faint muffled sound coming from inside. Wendy immediately called the police, and they rushed to her home. When the police arrived, they found that the package contained the body of the latest victim of John the serial killer. The investigation led them straight to John, but he was nowhere to be found. He had once again gone into hiding, leaving the police with more questions than answers. The story ends with the discovery of John's hideout and the discovery that he has continued his killing spree, but with a twist. Instead of just killing random people, he has been targeting the descendants of those who helped put him behind bars. He wants to get revenge and make sure that no one can ever stop him again. The story is left open-ended, leaving room for continuation, as the police and the residents of Pandora race against time to catch John before he strikes again. John. Chapter 2. Wendy, who had received the package from John, was now more determined than ever to catch him. She had a personal connection to the case, as her own grandmother was one of the people who helped put John behind bars. Wendy was afraid that she was next on John's list, and she wasn't going to sit around and wait for him to come for her. She teamed up with the police to track down John and bring him to justice. They worked tirelessly, following every lead and using all the resources at their disposal. One day, they finally got a breakthrough. They discovered a hidden room in John's hideout that contained all of his victims' belongings. The police also found evidence that linked John to several other crimes, including several murders that were previously unsolved. With this new information, the police and Wendy were able to track John to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. They surrounded the building and prepared to make their move. Wendy was at the forefront of the operation, her determination fueled by her desire to protect her family and bring John to justice. As they entered the warehouse, they found John waiting for them, a sinister smile on his face. He was holding a knife and surrounded by the remains of his latest victims. In a dramatic showdown, Wendy and the police engaged in a fierce battle with John, but in the end, they were able to overpower him and apprehend him. John was finally brought to trial, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The residents of Pandora were finally able to breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that the monster who had terrorized their town for so many years was finally behind bars. However, as the years went by, rumors began to circulate that John had a secret accomplice, someone who was helping him continue his killing spree even from behind bars. The residents of Pandora were once again living in fear, and the story was left open-ended, leaving room for a continuation as the search for John's accomplice continues. John, Chapter 3. With the help of his accomplice, John managed to escape from prison, leaving the authorities in a frantic search for him. He had undergone a radical transformation, using a plastic surgeon to change his appearance and make it harder for the authorities to find him. But after the procedure, John had killed the surgeon, making sure there were no witnesses to his new look. Now a wanted man, John went underground and continued his killing spree, but with a new identity and a new face. The authorities were stumped, as all their previous leads and methods of tracking John were now useless. It was like he had vanished into thin air. Years passed, and the residents of Pandora thought they were finally safe. They had buried their fears and went on with their lives, but little did they know John was still out there, watching and waiting for the right moment to strike. One day, Wendy, who had been instrumental in capturing John before, received a package in the mail. The return address was from John, and inside she found a taunting note telling her that he was back and that he was coming for her. Wendy was terrified, but she refused to give up. She teamed up with the police once again and set out to track down John. They scoured the countryside, following every lead, and after months of tireless searching, they finally found him. John was holed up in an old mansion on the outskirts of town, surrounded by the remains of his latest victims. The police and Wendy prepared for a final showdown, determined to put an end to John's killing spree once and for all. As they entered the mansion, they found John waiting for them, his eyes blazing with a sinister light. In a final battle, Wendy and the police engaged John, and after a long and grueling fight, they finally brought him to justice. This time, there was no escape for John. He was finally brought to trial and sentenced to death. The residents of Pandora were finally able to breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that the monster who had terrorized their town for so many years was finally gone for good. However, even in death, John continued to haunt them. The rumors of his accomplice still lingered, and many wondered if there was someone still out there carrying on John's legacy of terror. The story was left open-ended, leaving room for a continuation as the search for John's accomplice continues. John, Chapter 4. Years after John's death, strange things began to happen in Pandora. People started disappearing, and rumors of a monster on the loose once again spread throughout the town. The residents were once again living in fear, and the authorities were at a loss as to what to do. It wasn't until they received a tip from a local priest that they finally discovered the truth. The priest, a man of the cloth, had been using his powers for evil, and with the help of two powerful demons, he had resurrected John from the dead. John was now almost invincible, his powers increased tenfold, and he was on a mission to rain terror on Pandora once again. The authorities and Wendy, who had never given up her quest for justice, prepared for another showdown with John. They were joined by a group of hunters, experts in tracking and defeating supernatural creatures. Together, they set out to stop John and put an end to his reign of terror once and for all. As they entered the old mansion where John was hiding, they were met with a scene of utter carnage. Bodies were strewn everywhere, and the stench of death filled the air. John was there waiting for them, a smug smile on his face. In a final battle, Wendy and the authorities, along with the hunters, engaged John in a fierce fight. But this time, he was almost invincible, his powers fueled by the demons who had resurrected him. It seemed as if all was lost, and Pandora was doomed to suffer under John's reign of terror forever. Just when all hope seemed lost, Wendy remembered something her grandmother had told her. She was a powerful witch, and she had left behind a powerful spell that could defeat even the most powerful of demons. Wendy recited the spell, and to everyone's surprise, it worked. John was finally defeated, and Pandora was once again safe from the monster who had terrorized it for so many years. However, the story was left open-ended, as the evil priest who had resurrected John was still at large. The authorities and Wendy continued their quest for justice, determined to stop the priest and the demons who had resurrected John before they could wreak havoc on the world once again. The hunt was on, and the story was far from over. Stay tuned tomorrow evening for Chapter 5 of John.